everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me? Not well. Okay, thank you. As Jill said, I'm Barbara Mazie. I'm the executive director of an organization called Contra Costa ARC, which is it's the ARC in Contra Costa County, but I'm not here in that capacity today. I'm here today because I'm a member of an organization called Keeping the Lanterman Promise. And that's an organization that's about 5 years old. There may be some people in the room who aren't familiar with the term Lanterman Act, and just on that possibility, I want you to know that the Lanterman Act, that's how we refer to the law in California that is concerned with the whole field of developmental disabilities. It's part of the California Welfare and Institutions Code. We call it the Lanterman Act for short. And it's in the Welfare and Institutions Code, divisions 4.1 through 4.7. And if you care about the future of services, if you care about the future of your sons and daughters, you probably want to get to know about the Lanterman Act. It's available online. It also looks like this in hard copy. It used to be very thin, but it's thick now. But this book has the laws that are behind everything that happens. It's a very, very important book. Too many people, I think, operate today based on what we know should happen and all that sort of thing. You want to know the ground that this whole thing is built in, and that's the Lanterman Act. Unfortunately, the print is small. The thing about the Lanterman Act is that, like many laws, it's full of promises. There are a lot of promises in there. Just like in all laws. And the thing about the promises is some of them have been kept and some of them have been broken. If you ask people, what is the promise of the Lanterman Act? It's going to depend on who you ask what the answer is, because it's true. Lots of promises are in there. What I want to talk about today is what I believe, what many people believe is the most fundamental, most important promise of the Lanterman Act. And it's the one that you have to know about if you want to have a world where 1,000 or even 100 more flowers can bloom. It's the most essential promise in the Act. Let's see. You've heard a lot already this morning. We know why we're here. We know the title of the conference. Your sons and daughters need programs, they need employment, they need housing, and you certainly heard already today that existing services are in jeopardy, and it's not easy to start new ones, so that's a really serious position to be in. My question to you is, what will it take to create and sustain the options that your sons and daughters need? Some of them are options that exist today, some of them are new, but what's it really going to take? And it's really a big picture question. It's so easy to get lost in the things that are immediate to you, your needs for a program today or this housing situation or that day program. But I want to ask you to go to the bigger picture level and talk about how could it be that this system exists? The things that we have today, why are they here? They don't have to be here, but they are. What is it that created them? And what keeps it in place? Now, we heard this morning that parents coming together and advocating are the reason why the system exists. Okay, that's a nice general statement, but what does that mean in terms of the actual steps that had to happen and what had to get in place? So please think big picture for this discussion. Okay, my question is, why is there any funding today? We know that we have problems in California. We know that there are all kinds of needs that we have that aren't being met. But when you think about other states, you realize, in spite of all the problems that we have, we're in much better shape than a lot of other states, where all they have are federal Medicaid waiver dollars, and that's the only people that get services. I think you heard that referred to in the panel this morning. In other states, young people graduate from high school and face literally not just years, but decades of waiting on waiting lists to get whatever services might be available. And they have to go and find out what's available and then wait. Why is it different in California? We're disappointed in California because the system doesn't work the way it's supposed to, but it's so much better than other states. So my question is, why is there funding? Do you think it's because it's the right thing to do, and here in California we're very progressive and we do the right thing? Is that why we have services? Is it because of our strong legislative support? We do have a lot of champions. Senator Bell was here this morning, but I think everybody except Holly Mitchell voted for the budget that had no rate increases in it this year. So I'm not sure about our strong legislative support. What about the political power of our grassroots? We're known as having very strong, healthy grassroots in the developmental disability system. Is that why services are here? Okay, my suggestion to you is that the correct answer, we're at a university, so I thought multiple choice would be good. The correct answer is D, in my opinion. I think there's another reason why California has the services that it has. And the reason, I think, might surprise you. The reason has to do with that little document called the Individual Program Plan, the IPP. And the thing about the IPP is that it's really lost a lot of image over the years. It's really become kind of not talked about so much, kind of old-fashioned. When I ask parents about their IPP experience, most of the comments that I get are frustration. They're sick of the process. They've had 3 different case managers in the last 2 years. Their case manager doesn't understand the family or tells them what to do, and it's generally a negative experience. That's really sad. I mean, that isn't what was supposed to happen. We were supposed to have a wonderful system with case managers assigned from birth to the end of life that really knew your family and really advocated for your needs. It was a beautifully designed system, but it's not working too well right now. There are very real problems with it, but as the song says, sometimes you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And we have to really pay attention to that because there's something about that IPP that is holding things in place that we need and that you really need if you want to make change in the future. California is the only place, I was going to say in the state, it's in the state, in the nation, in the world, that has a system that was designed to have services that start from the individual. Think about what you know about how systems work. You know, governments have programs, all kinds of programs. Insurance companies have benefits. What it is the people in power decide what they're going to offer, and then they make a list, like a menu, and then they decide who's eligible for what. That's the way everything works. Unemployment, Social Security, healthcare, everything, every social service system, the people in power, and Senator Beal said this morning, it's kind of top-down. That's the way everything is everywhere in the whole wide world. You know, taking it to extremes, dictators deciding what everybody does. Nobody starts with the individual person, the individual citizen, and builds a system that starts from their needs and goes up. I'm pretty sure that California's developmental disability system is the only place in the whole world that does that. It's absolutely the most radical thing there could ever be. And I think it's because it's radical that a lot of people in power, policymakers and others, don't talk about it a lot. It's your power. It's the individual's power. So in a top-down world, we have a system that starts with the individual. And the thing that you have to know is it's that system, that idea of having an individual program plan that's consumer-driven, that really in this system is the only leverage you have. Otherwise, essentially, you're just begging. You're just hoping that the legislature will do what you want them to do. You're asking them, you're making your case. But as we've seen, you can bring tons of great information, tons of rationale. You can show the effectiveness of various services. You can prove everything, and they can say, no. You know, they can just say no, and they do, and they have been of late. And sometimes they can say yes, and then you get all excited. But the power dynamics are still that way. Whose decision is this? The IPP, I'm here to tell you, is the only leverage that you have to get the services you need for your sons and daughter that are designed for them. I think the best example is for people that have kids in school. If you have children in special ed, you know the role of the Individual Education Plan, the IEP. And the IEP is great because it comes from a federal law. And so there's that power of having it be national, and there's a lot of people that know about it, and everybody knows that IEPs are there. And then you come to graduation day, and several people have referred to it as the abyss, when people step away and they no longer have that protection. What I'm here to tell you is the IPP is for adults what the IEP was in school. And you could not have gotten, I mean, it's not easy, God knows it's not easy, but what you have been able to get in your school programs, you can only get in the adult world through the IPP. The reason why it has its power, what does the 3 mean? Oh my gosh, okay, I have to talk faster. Oh dear, 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 I thought that meant I was on minute 3. Okay, the reason why the IPP is so powerful in California, okay, it's the only leverage you have. The reason why it's powerful in California is because there was a Supreme Court decision in 1985, and the reason there was a lawsuit is because the state decided they didn't like the IPP. They had gone into effect earlier in the late 70s, but then there was a budget crisis in 1984, and they decided, oh, no, we only have money to pay for these few things. So they cut services. They said you can only have these categories of services. And so that resulted in a lawsuit. It was ARC versus DDS. And this was the result of the lawsuit, a unanimous decision that the Lanterman Act defines the right of developmentally disabled persons to be provided with services and the corresponding, this is key, obligation of the state to provide them. It says they have to. There's no have to in anything we've talked about today. This is the only place there's a have to. That is your strength. And it went further, and it explained that the IPP procedure, it's through the IPP procedure that the Act grants to each developmentally disabled person, and the obligation it imposes on the state are implemented. So that is really, really powerful, that IPP. No wonder you don't hear about it much. The thing about the IPP is it's the only tool you have that will It's the only tool you have that you can use to assure that your sons and daughters get the services that they need. You have to learn how to use it. People don't have a lot of classes in how to make the IPP work for you. They do for IEPs, because that's institutionalized nationally. You need to learn how the IPP is supposed to work. God knows it does not work that way, but you can make it work. You have to find out how it was designed, and that'll help you through the whole adult life of your sons and daughters. It's the only tool that can help you get the services that you need. The other thing is the IPP, in conjunction with one other thing in the Lanterman Act, is the only way new flowers are going to grow in terms of having a legal club to do it. That is the idea of open vendorization in California. I know some of you have tried to start programs. I know you know how hard it is. I know the Regional Center can think of 50 million reasons why they can't vendorize you, but part of the Lanterman Act is open vendorization. If you meet the criteria for vendorization, they have to vendorize you. You might have to make them, but that's the way it's designed. What services are needed is supposed to come from the IPP, and then vendors are supposed to be able to create services to fulfill those needs, and that's the way the system is supposed to work. People in bureaucracies hate that, and very understandably. It's an inconvenience. They want to be able to say what you're going to have, who's eligible, how much you're going to get. They can control their budgets. Their life is easy. It's hard to manage an entitlement system like this. I have many friends in regional centers, and I feel bad for them. You know, it is hard to manage, but I'm sorry, that's why you get the big bucks. Little joke there. It's very hard to do. That was a joke. I know they're underpaid, but that's what they're there for. And too many of them, I think, surrender to the difficulty and, you know, try to deal with controlling the budget and that sort of thing. But what they should be doing, and what we all have to make sure that they do, is honor the way this system was designed. Unfortunately, because it's difficult, there have been efforts underway from the beginning to erode the power of the IPP. It started immediately. Actually, it was when the Supreme Court decision came out. Right after that, you could see the different things happening that were trying to chip away at the power of the IPP. I like to think of it in terms of three kinds of chipping away. The first is through the budget. They try to reduce the power of the IPP through the budget. They've only accomplished that twice. The legislature can do it. The only time they've done it is when they put volumes of respite into the trailer bill that said people can only have this much respite. That was a huge, terrible thing that happened that a lot of us tried to prevent. But really, it's the first time they ever tried to mandate volumes of service. And that has to be stopped because the volume of service is supposed to be determined in your IPP with you there. So that was a bad one. The other bad one was they stopped social recreation services, and that was a categorical reduction that they're not supposed to do. So there's budget-related cutting. There's also this other way that it's chipped away, and this is hard to talk about because it's a sheep in wolf's clothing. There are wonderful ideas that people have, but what they try to do is apply that idea to everyone, as if everyone was the same. And if it's a good idea, you really want to get behind it and say everybody should have this, but ask yourself, what's it doing to the IPP? If laws get in place that apply to everybody, you're losing the individualization of the system. You're losing the individual right. And if you can do it for something you like, that means they can do it for something you don't like. So there's that difficulty with the wolf in sheep's clothing. And the third way they can undermine the entitlement and the IPP is by starving out providers through reduced rates. And that is an indirect attack. It's not a direct attack on the IPP, it's indirect, but it's just as effective because you can have a beautiful IPP. If you can't get the services, your IPP isn't worth it. So that's where most of the pressure has been, to try to starve out providers. And that's been working beautifully, unfortunately. So those are the things we have to watch for. The Lanterman Act and its promise, its fundamental promise, is only going to survive if you are vigilant, if you watch, if you look at those laws that they're trying to get passed and look for how is this going to affect the IPP. It might be something you really like, but ask yourself, how will this impact the IPP? One of the things that people are very excited about right now that Gabriel mentioned this morning is self-determination. If you're going towards self-determination, as you do that, fine, but make sure you don't lose your connection to your IPP, because that's your contract with the state. That's the thing that must be funded. The Supreme Court said that there's no issue, there's some question about how the IPP is implemented, but there's no question that it must be funded. So you can bet your booty that DDS, or more appropriately, Department of Finance, is trying to break the relationship between you and the IPP. If they can separate you, you've lost your clout. You see that? So be careful. And when laws are proposed, you have to look at them carefully and ask yourself how it will impact the IPP. Also, because we're in a university, we have homework. Okay, we have homework. Go home and read sections 4646 and 4646.5 of the Lanterman Act. It might make you cry because it shows how it's supposed to work, but it shows you what you have to fight for. And then my last comment is this organization that I'm part of, Keeping the Lanterman Promise, we have a website that you can visit. It's a totally volunteer group. We all have full-time jobs, so we can't keep everything totally together, but we do have people, some parents, some professionals, that will go around and speak to groups. If you have groups that want a presentation, and it's a 2-hour presentation that really focuses on how tools you can use to have your IPP process be more effective. So that's something you can do. And then Jill entitled this, she entitled this presentation, 3 Things Every Parent and Conservator Should Know, and I thought, oh God, how am I going to keep it to 3? But I'll tell you the 3 things. Number 1 is the IPP, for all of its being pushed aside and not sexy and all that stuff, the IPP is the foundation of this system and it holds it together. That's number 1. Number 2 is learn to use it to work for your family and to be in place so that the system can grow. And number 3 is protect it in law. Protect it, make sure it doesn't get further eroded. If anybody tries to change those 2 sections of the Lanterman Act, watch it like a hawk and don't let it happen. I think that having that IPP in place and keeping it strong in law that's the ground in which flowers can grow.